welcome. It's Mary Ellen McGonagle here with your Friday afternoon MEM Edge show. As always, the show where we bring you where the action is in the broader markets. Another big week, certainly for tech. We're going to take a look at those broader market indices and beyond. But first, let's take a look at some of the economic data that drove price action last week. And certainly most impactful was the Federal Reserve's decision to reduce interest rates by 0.25%. Equally impactful is that they are anticipating another 2 more 0.25% interest rates cuts into year end. So not totally surprising, more reassuring than anything else. We also did get some housing data last week that came in weaker than anticipated. And then we also had some housing earnings reports that were lower than expected as well. We'll take a look at that group. We also next week will get some key inflation data. That's going to be the Federal Reserve's PCE, their closely watched gauge. And then also next week, a number of Federal Reserve governors will be speaking. Fed Chair Powell will give a speech next week as well. So you'll want to be on the lookout for that. And then also consumer sentiment for September is due next week as well. Now, let's go ahead and jump right in and take a look at these broader markets. And here we are, daily price chart of the S&P 500. Another new high for the S&P 500, up a little more than 1%. I will say today was triple witching, and I highlight that because we're going to see a number of names, and in this case, the S&P 500, super high volume, which is very typical of that triple witching characteristic. So here we are with that RSI. We are back up in an overbought position. In other words, we're up above 70. Not overly concerning just yet. I will get more into this with my weekly MEM Edge report on Sunday. I'm noting it here. And then also we do have that MACD, that moving average convergence divergence, sitting up here in positive territory as well. So that near-term uptrend very much in place. Let's take a look at the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ was up about 2% last week, and we did have a very nice push into the close. We also have an overbought condition, even more so with the NASDAQ, given strength in technology stocks, RSI and MACD, both in positive territory. So from here, we're going to drill down as usual, take a look beneath the surface at the 11 sectors in the S&P 500. 2-month daily price chart view, and then it's sorted by that relative strength indicator. You want to have a very good sense of where that strength is emanating from in the markets. It's all about participating in that strength. So up here for front and center, XLC, this is the communication services sector, and you can see we are forming a nice high tight flag formation. It was not the top performer this week, up about 1.7. As we move through, I will share with you certainly one of the heaviest weighted names in there and what it is doing as far as exhibiting superior strength and why. And then up here, technology. This was the top performing sector, up 2.7%. Take a look at the advance over the last 2 days. This would be Thursday and Friday, subsequent to that interest rate cut by the Federal Reserve. Now we are up here in overbought with tech as well, with the RSI above 70, but you can see that we've been able to withstand that going back historically into that June into July period. So not as concerning. A nice upward trending MACD as well with this technology sector, and that is an area that saw a lot of names popping, for lack of a better word. And then as we move through XLY, this is consumer discretionary, up about 1.2%. Another nice high tight flag formation forming up here. And we did see the overall retail group fare pretty well last week, but it is an area of growth, and we are seeing it continue to ascend to new heights. Also, as we move through, you do want to be aware of areas that were languishing that are beginning to perk up a bit here. This is the industrial sector, XLI, and we are seeing the nice right side of a base forming here. Overall, this industry is going to be very economically sensitive. A declining interest rate environment is going to be constructive for this area, and certainly AI-related industrial names are on the move. Moving through, taking a look at utilities, it did have a move back above this shorter term moving averages, but not overly exuberant in this group overall. However, there are some spaces, particularly nuclear related energy names and alternative energy. We'll get into that, but overall, the utility group still has a negative MACD, just slightly positive RSI. There are certainly other areas related to AI that are going to benefit you more as far as being involved. Now, looking at some of these weaker areas, we can see consumer staples hanging down below each of its key moving averages, still a negative RSI and a negative MACD. Normally a defensive area of the markets, and to see it languishing is not in any way overly surprising. So from here, we're going to move through, take a look at some ETFs, and this is going to allow us to drill down further beyond the broader sectors. Again, all about uncovering where that strength is. I'm going to go ahead and add a relative strength indicator and then sort it in descending order so we can in fact get that view. So up here front and center, IGV, this is the software ETF, and it had been languishing, not participating wholly going back into the beginning of this month, but certainly a nice charge to new highs. We can see with IGV, this particular group was up the highest among these sub-industry groupings. It was up about 4.5%. We're going to cover a couple of the names in here that are exhibiting that outperformance. And then also gold still sitting up here, GLD, and the overall group was mostly flat, but still sitting up here very constructively for those that are a bit more defensive and want to perhaps diversify a bit. It is looking constructive. Also, as we take a look beyond the S&P 500, this is sitting up here at the forefront due to its performance. Let's take a look at another high performing tech area. This is semiconductors, SOXX. You can see that gap up. Again, this is following that interest rate decline, a decrease in interest rates. So SOXX up almost 4% for the week. When we get that MACD crossover black line up through the red, signaling a new uptrend, ideally you want to see that separation, the black line from the red. That is indicating that we are seeing lift off, and indeed we have seen a nice advance in semiconductor stocks. I can tell you with my MEM Edge report, we've had a number of double-digit and beyond gainers, nice high volume on that advance as well. And then taking a look at some of these other sub-industry groupings, actually this is a major index. This is the small cap Russell 2000, and it had a wonderful week, up about 2%. In fact, we're going to take a look at a lot of these small cap names that have been later to the party, but are really picking up. Moving through relative to these smaller areas or sub-industry groupings, I talked about alternative energy, and this is TAN. This is solar, one area of alt energy, and it is still sitting up here quite nicely. We did have other areas that expanded further, which we will get into. Biotechs also exhibiting vibrancy, up almost 1.5%. Not overly vibrant, but certainly an area. We're going to look at some small cap names in that group as well. Bank stocks did wake up this week. This is KRE. Again, that declining interest rate, and that is a good backdrop for these bank stocks, and they are back into a nice uptrend. Areas that are a bit weaker, I talked about XHB. This is the home building ETF of the S&P 500. And you can see that we have pulled back despite a declining interest rate environment. All about that housing data that came out. We have more housing data coming up next week, but then also LEN came out with numbers today. Lennar, one of the bigger home builders, and you can see this sharp 4% decline coming in with numbers that were below estimates. And last up, we can take a look at IHI, and this is within healthcare, the medical products space, still struggling a bit down here below that 200-day simple moving average, pointing it out. If you have representation in that area, you will want to take a close look at your given names to see if they are remaining healthy or not. Now, from here, I did want to share with you some other areas that actually have fared really well last week. And what we are looking at here are the Magnificent Seven, those heavy hyperscaler names in the broader markets. And again, that RSI in descending order. So let's take a look. Alphabet, this is one of the heavyweight names that I talked about in XLC Communication Services. And we can see that Alphabet has really continued to advance. We did have a sharp gain last week, about 6.5%. Now, this gap up going back to the beginning of this month was all about that antitrust ruling, so that Alphabet does not have to, at this time, worry about it, so that we can see this sharp subsequent advance, still very much in a confirmed uptrend. Let's take a look at next up here is Tesla, and this also had a fantastic week. I'm going to mark this name up, all about their announcement last week relative to, outside of their Tesla EVs, is their continued move into robotics and other advanced areas. So what we are forming here is a nice high tight flag formation, but most definitely a nice confirmed uptrend in Tesla as it continues to advance. From here, we can take a look at Apple. The stock had a nice move today. They did advance to their global sales of their new iPhone today. And in response, we saw this nice 2+ week base breakout, and the stock was up over 4.5% for the week. So we can see these M7 stocks, by and large, were on the move higher. Let's take a look at Netflix now. I'm sorry, NVIDIA. NVDA, the stock was down 1%. You may wonder why, in the face of semiconductors faring well. And this is another news item very worthy of mentioning, and that is the fact that China has mandated that Chinese corporations no longer purchase USAI chips, and that certainly would put NVIDIA front and center. While we are on that subject, let's take a look at a Chinese related name that does produce AI chips that did benefit from this ruling. And here we are. This is Baidu, gap up into this period of consolidation. Also of note today on the US-China relationship is the fact that Trump did have I believe, a phone meeting with the Chinese government, and it was viewed as having gone constructively. So that certainly was a relief for the broader markets as well. And we can take a look at some of these other names that are languishing relatively. Now, Amazon was up certainly more than the S&P 500, but relative to its peers in the M7 space, just a bit of back and fill, not as compelling as these other areas that are up here at the forefront. Now, we did talk about software stocks. Let's take a look at a name that is really quite compelling from my work. This is Cadence Design. I'm going to take a minute to mark this chart up because we can see that it did drift lower. I talked about software stocks struggling a bit, but in line with the broader industry group, we formed the right side of a base with this on the verge of a nice base breakout, positive RSI, and a positive MACD. So we're sitting up here really quite nicely with this particular name. It is AI related as far as its ability to help companies really corral and take advantage of AI capabilities. Now, I did talk about small cap names, and I have a number of stocks. I will tell you that these names, I did put together my list, and pretty much every time I do this, I put it together last evening. And of course, today they have all popped quite a bit, but still potentially early in their move. So let's take a look at some of these smaller names. First up is going to be quantum related stocks. Some of you may be familiar with that concept. This is going to be the next phase of AI. This is Rigetti, RGTI, and here we are with this base breakout into a nice confirmed uptrend. Now, no doubt we are up here on 86 with that RSI, but nice high volume characteristics on the advance. So this is one of the smaller cap leading names that are in that quantum space. Let's take a look at QS. This is still an area that they are working on as far as bugs, and it has not been perfected quite yet. But again, it is that next stage, that next wave of AI capabilities. And here we are with QS, Quantum Escape. We can see the right side of this base forming as we approach a potential 14.5 base breakout. IONQ is another smaller cap company. These are all, when I say small, they could be viewed as mid cap in about that $7 billion market cap. And then IONQ certainly had a base breakout last week into a nice uptrend. I'm going to add a 5-day simple moving average, and this is the type of name that you can use as historical precedent when you are looking at these names once they begin to have lift off. And here we are with that 5-day simple moving average that acts as support, so that pullbacks to that level do become ideal buy points. From here, crypto, we did see some of these smaller crypto names on the move this week as well. And this is all about a risk-on environment. Quantum, crypto, biotechs, all riskier, certainly in this small cap space. Here we are with Spark, CLSK. It is a crypto mining stock, about 3.7 billion. We did experience this nice base breakout this week, and that MACD just entering into bullish territory. Another crypto mining related stock is HUT8 mining. And you can see when we talk about these longer bases, this is taking us back to December, about a 9+ month base breakout into a nice uptrend. Let's go ahead and pivot over to biotech names, and I'll share with you some of these are going to be awfully tiny. I will tell you that biotechs, for the most part, can be volatile. And then when you marry it with that small cap, it will take adept oversight to make sure that you are faring well. But this is Prime Medicine, PRME. It's a little under $1 billion in market cap. You can see this nice base breakout developing, positive RSI and MACD. The company is all about curing genetic disorders. It's advancements that are taking place, all about AI helping to develop these new procedures. Nectar, NKTR, you can see that we had that base breakout period of consolidation, and then another gap up, an oncology company. And then another company that targets cancer is Tango Therapeutics, TNGX, just under $1 billion. But let's take a look. Go ahead and mark this chart up, and you will see that we had this very lengthy period of consolidation. And then this week, a nice base breakout on this particular stock. Now, I will say when I'm looking at biotechs, I do want to focus on those companies that actually have earnings, and that's going to be far and few between a lot of the companies. It's many companies that are in the biotech space. They are still in their development phase. So ideally, if you can capture those companies that have begun to profit from their capabilities, that is where you want to focus. Last up, we'll take a look at HROW in this biotech space. This is an ophthalmic company, very big numbers here with their growth prospects. And we can see this nice uptrend as the stock continues to ascend. Next up, we're going to take a look at robotics, another certainly riskier, but also forward-looking area of the markets as technology continues to advance. We're taking a look at OUST. This company is about $2 billion in market cap. They provide the sensors that allow these robotic machines to do their thing, if I may. I was going to mark this particular chart up to highlight the fact that we are on the cusp of a actually about an 7-week potential base breakout. Nice high volume yesterday on that advance. So we can keep an eye on that name for those of you that are looking to participate in this move into small caps, and it's expected to continue to advance into year end. AI related, smaller names, one of my favorites, Big Bear. This is BBAI, a nice downtrend reversal, positive RSI. The company is touted as being the next Palantir, but it certainly is a mini me. They also deal with defense-related companies and AI. Here we are, another AI-related name, TTM Technologies, and this stock did execute a base breakout this week. They provide the circuit boards that are needed for AI, about 5.5 billion. And you can see that we do still have potential upside with that RSI, which certainly is encouraging. Another stock, and again, I did highlight this to myself last evening, but I wanted to highlight it. It's a Chinese autonomous vehicle, Pony, Pony, and you can see what drew me to this particular stock before we did get today's sharp 18% advance. But I did mention this, that a number of these companies, despite having significant gains on any given day, are still relatively early in their advance. We can see the volume characteristics are pretty light in that particular name, so you will want to take that into account. Metals this week, a lot of uranium stocks that are picking up. This is all about nuclear energy. They are critical in initiating or helping those nuclear companies provide energy. And you can see today it advanced quite sharply. We're going to take a look at a couple of small names in that uranium space just to keep you on top and aware of what's shaping up. This is Centrus Energy, LEU. Here we are with that nice space breakout, nice characteristics on the momentum side, another nuclear, and that LEU is about 4.5 billion. USAR is also nuclear power related. This is USA rare earth, not as advanced. So we can see that we do have that MACD just getting into positive territory. However, when you see a company that is not participating, I showed you that URA ETF, and this particular stock was actually down almost 1%. You want to keep that in mind. Ideally, you want to be in a company that is not only participating, but outperforming. Let's take a look at another rare earth mining stock. This is MP, is the ticker symbol. And this particular company is about 13 billion, but take a look. We just had that MACD black line up through the red. So certainly quite vibrant as it relates to some of these rare metals that are really quite instrumental as far as AI power. XLI, I talked about that industry group coming into play. This is AGX Argon. It's a telecom infrastructure play, nice base breakout, and looking for further upside. Last up, we'll take a look at PSIX, and this is another industrial company forming the nice right side of this base, very orderly, and it is a very constructive looking chart. And for those of you who've enjoyed what you have seen today, go ahead and hit that like button. You'll be alerted to future videos as we move forward. As always, leave comments. I do enjoy viewing them and responding to them as well. Everyone have a fantastic weekend. I'll look for you here again next Friday.